The worst nuclear disaster in history wasn't Chernobyl. It was a Soviet accident 10 times worse that the government covered up for 30 years. Before we continue, would you mind liking this video and subscribing to our channel? Now, let's discover the terrifying Kyshtym disaster that almost nobody knows about. On September 29, 1957, a nuclear waste storage tank at the secret Soviet facility called Mayak in the Ural Mountains exploded with the force of 70 to 100 tons of TNT. The explosion released twice as much radioactive material as the Chernobyl disaster would release 29 years later. It contaminated over 20,000 square kilometers of Soviet territory with deadly radiation. But here's the shocking cover-up. The Soviet government completely denied the accident happened. They evacuated 10,000 people from contaminated areas but told them absolutely nothing about radiation exposure or health risks. The facility was so secret that the nearby city of Kyshtym didn't officially exist on Soviet maps. The government referred to it only as Chelyabinsk 40 and forbade anyone from mentioning its real location. The explosion occurred because Soviet engineers had been carelessly dumping high-level nuclear waste into poorly designed storage tanks for years. The cooling system failed, and the waste mixture reached critical temperature. When the tank exploded, it launched the 160-ton concrete lid into the air and released a radioactive cloud that spread across the entire region, contaminating hundreds of villages. Soviet authorities didn't warn local residents about the danger. People continued drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated food, and breathing radioactive air for days while officials debated what to do. Eventually, the military evacuated entire villages at gunpoint, bulldozing homes and slaughtering all livestock to prevent contaminated meat from entering the food supply. Residents were given just hours to pack and leave forever. The most horrifying part: the Soviet government classified the disaster as top secret and threatened survivors with prison if they ever spoke about what happened. The world didn't learn the truth until 1976, nearly 20 years later. Radiation levels in the contaminated zone were so extreme that Soviet maps literally erased dozens of villages from existence. Over 270,000 people received significant radiation exposure, but official records claimed the accident never happened. Western intelligence agencies detected unusual radiation levels over Europe, but couldn't pinpoint the source. The Soviets blamed it on a minor industrial accident and refused all international inspection requests. The disaster area, now called the East Ural Radioactive Trace, remains one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Parts of it will stay dangerously radioactive for thousands of years. Modern estimates suggest the Kyshtym disaster released between 50 to 100 million curies of radioactivity compared to Chernobyl's 50 million curies. Yet Chernobyl is famous while Kyshtym remains largely unknown. The Mayak facility continued operating in secret for decades after the explosion, causing additional environmental contamination that affected over 500,000 people across the Soviet Union. Soviet nuclear scientists who tried to warn authorities about safety violations at Mayak were arrested, imprisoned, or disappeared. The government prioritized nuclear weapons production over human safety. That's your hidden nuclear disaster knowledge bomb.